السلام عليكم. يسعد مساءكم جميعا and welcome to our today's workshop, which is going to be about strategies for writing the literature review. Dr. Rawan Saaty is going to present it today, and thank you, Dr. Rawan, for taking the lead to present this workshop. So Dr. Rawan is Assistant Professor of Applied Linguistics at ELI. She is also the Assistant Director of the Academic Writing Center. So Dr. Rawan, the floor is yours. You may start now.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everyone to the workshop for today. As Dr. Basim has instructed, it's about the strategies for writing the literature review. One thing that I need to say at the beginning is that you come from different fields. So what I'm going to say today might apply to you and it might not. So the one thing that you need to do is read into your field. You know how you should write in the field that you are in by reading from it. So what I'm going to give you today are maybe tips and tricks to help you with the literature review, but there are no 100% rule for a yes or no thing. This is something that I like to say at the beginning of every workshop I give, because again, you come from different fields and this might not apply to everyone. So, sorry. Okay, so an overview of the session today. Thank you, Naseem. So we're going to start with a general question, and we're going to spend maybe a quarter of the time on this, and we're going to discuss what is the literature review. And then we're going to talk about something that is very helpful and beneficial, especially for those who are doing a PhD, and it's called the literature matrix. It helps you to organize your studies or the studies that you are reading, and it helps you to find the gap, which is the most important thing that you need to have in your research, in your proposal, or in your paper. And after that, we're going to discuss structuring an argumentative literature review. So, sorry, I think I need to click. Yes. So if I can ask you, please, and maybe you can answer in the chat box, what is the literature review to you? What is the literature review? Maybe you can give me a definition. As I said, you come from different fields, so I'm expecting maybe various answers. So Rana is saying previous studies, comparing to previous studies, previous experience, okay. So I can see the word previous popping up a lot. Anything else? General information about the research, review of sources related to the topic, evaluation of other studies, analysis of previous works, collection of previous studies, every point talked about in the subject. Oh, Bender, this is too much. You can't talk about every point discussed before. History in general. Dr. Amal, related knowledge to find the gap. Finding the gap is very specific. We're trying to find more of a somewhere in between. A summary of other studies, an overview of knowledge about the relevant field. Somehow you are all correct, but also there are some points that I would like you to keep in mind. Understanding the topic, that's not the literature review, no. Understanding the topic, it's what you need to do before you choose the topic. The literature review is the stage that you actually know what the topic is and you're just going to discuss it. Up-to-date information, yes, it is. It should be up-to-date. It's research and evaluation of sources that you need. Good. So, the literature review, according to Cresswell, you have to add your opinion about others. Exactly, Maria, thank you. So the literature review is a written summary of sources that describes the past and current states of the research topic and provides a rationale for conducting a research study. Why do you do the literature review? Because you need to tell the audience or the readers that the topic you are discussing, it's important, it's current, it's needed, and there are some questions yet to be answered and you are going to answer them. So it's one of the most important aspects of a study. And of course, when I'm talking about a study here, I'm trying to generalize because I can be talking about the proposal. The literature review is basically the most important part of the proposal. And I can be talking also about a research study or a paper that you need to submit for a course, or maybe a thesis, a dissertation, a research paper, as I said. Every one of these has literature review, even chapters or maybe sections. So again, what I'm going to talk about today applies maybe somewhat to all of them. The literature review contains information from quantitative, qualitative, and mixed method studies, of course, depending on the field, that are mainly peer reviewed. If I can ask you, please, what do I mean by peer reviewed? I give here a few examples, like journal articles, books, and chapters from edited volumes. And they are all peer reviewed. What do I mean by that, if anyone knows? The studies that you have in your literature review need to be peer reviewed. Anyone knows what that means? Reviewed by interviewees, justified, reviewed by an expert in the field. Another person checked the subject. It's works that are published and reviewed, seen by others, fields, and colleagues. Good, Miss Naila. So when I say that you need the studies that you have in your literature review need to be peer reviewed, I mean they need to be checked by experts in the field. Not everything that you find online or you find in even the library is peer reviewed. Peer meaning it's checked and reviewed by peers in the field, by people and experts in that field. So they're going to say if the pieces of information in this paper or in this journal article is accurate or not. What are some examples of published materials that are not peer reviewed? Exactly. How can you know, Ya Muhsina? What are some examples of published material that are not peer reviewed? Anyone knows? Scientific magazines, they are peer reviewed. You can see journal articles. Wikipedia, you should never use Wikipedia in as a reference for a research paper, ever. Websites, maybe, but again, you shouldn't use them. You should use journal articles, books, chapters from edited volumes. One example of something that we all love to read, but we shouldn't have in the literature review is previous MA and PhD theses. I don't know about you, but for me, when I first start to read in a subject, I like to read PhD theses. Exactly, Wikipedia is a big no-no. I need to stop looking at the chat and just focus. Okay, so as I was saying, PhD theses, even though they give you so many good information, you should not include them in your literature review. Why? Because they are not peer reviewed. The only people who take a look at the PhD thesis are the supervisor and two examiners, and it's not enough. Because a published paper or a research article that's published in a journal takes maybe up to 2 or 3 or 5 years sometimes to be published. And that's because every piece of information in it gets checked and double checked and triple checked even, which makes it a good source for you. So اختصر على نفسك, use journal articles, use books, edited books, and use chapters from edited volumes. When I say chapters from edited volumes, I mean, for example, if you have a book about a topic, but the book is written, every chapter in the book is written by a different author or a couple of different authors. So every chapter is actually written by different people. And this kind of book gets published within maybe 5 years sometimes. Periodicals, they are peer reviewed. What I mean by peer reviewed, people who are experts in the field, they have looked at the let's say the material at hand, and they checked it. They said it's good. They sent it to the writer once, twice, three times to double check it, to correct the information in it. The writer sent it again as a second draft, as a third draft, as a fourth draft, until it's completely good, and maybe it's good for publication. Then it gets published. You can never publish if it's a good journal. You can never publish in it without having someone check the paper for you. That's what we mean by peer reviewed. Okay, so the good examples that are peer reviewed are journal articles, books, and chapters from edited volumes. PhD theses, MA dissertations, I like them because they include a lot of background information about the topic. But when it comes to actually including them in my literature review, try not to do that. Try to avoid this, actually. Okay, so the literature review, again, to continue, the literature review is a tool that demonstrates your familiarity with the previous research. It shows the reader that you know what you are talking about. It positions your study in relation to the field. It says where you are in relation to everything that's been published before you. It allows you to identify gaps. Gaps, again, are extremely important in a research study. It develops your theoretical and conceptual frameworks. If you are in a field that uses a theoretical framework or a conceptual framework, doing the literature review allows you to get to these, or to get to them. And it leads to your research questions. It basically, what it tells the examiner, or what it tells the reader, that you know how to think critically and you know how to research. It showcases your critical thinking and research skills, which are, again, extremely important in the field that you are working in. I saw in a lot of the answers that you've given me that you said it's a summary. It's a summary. The literature review, it's a summary. It's a summary. It's honestly not. The literature review is actually not a straightforward summary of everything you read on the topic. If you think of the literature review as a summary of everything you read on the topic, you'll end up with not just one book, maybe 10 books. It's not a summary. And it's not a chronological account of how the research has developed in your field. You're not saying what happened in the field since day one until now. That's not what you're supposed to do. And it's not an annotated bibliography that talks about the importance of each work to the reader or the larger community. You're not discussing each study. So yes, it's not a summary at all. It's more about a justification for your study. Why are you doing your study? Because the previous research has found 1, 2, 3, but they didn't find 1, 2, 3, so I'm doing 1, 2, 3. That's basically what you are saying to the readers. Okay? Why would you review the literature? Again, this is what you're trying to tell the reader. Try to think that you are actually talking to the reader. So what should you tell the reader? Okay? You review the literature to identify the field, to talk about the field in general, and to create a research space. How can you identify the field? You're basically, again, try to think that you are actually talking to the reader. That makes it easier for you to write. So you should try to think of it this way. You can say, my thesis or my proposal or my research paper is unique. No one has done anything like it before. It draws on and brings together a combination of research that you have not thought of before, that the readers haven't thought of before. My literature review then defines this field. What do we mean by field even? The field is basically the studies that have been done on the topic, and it's the research area that exists at this point in time. Where do you stand within this area? Okay. And also, when I say to create a research space and subsequently you are actually identifying or highlighting the gap, how are you saying this? You can say, for example, again, you're not going to say this literally, but this is how you need to address it in a sense. You can say, other people have said this. I read for fulano, 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 fulan. They have said this, and that. This raises a number of questions. There are a few questions that we need to answer, but no one has answered one or more of these questions, but these questions are important. They need to be answered. What am I going to do? I will answer them. This is where I come in. When you think of the literature review as kind of like the answer to the questions that haven't been put forth before, it makes it again easier for you. So to recap what I've been trying to say so far, the literature review is not a summary of everything that has been done on the field before, ever. It's more about a justification for you to conduct your study. Okay? So if you have any specific questions, maybe you can leave them until the end, or maybe you can discuss them as I move on to the next step, because I'm not going to be able to look at the chat box every single time. I'm sorry about that. But reviewing the literature versus the literature review chapters. What's the difference, or what's the factor that actually combines both? When I say what do I mean by reviewing the literature and the literature review chapter? Of course, one of them is the process and the other is the product. Reviewing the literature, what do you think? It's the process or the product? When you review the literature, when you go through it, when you read it, when you try to analyze what has been done in it, this is the process. Excellent. But the literature review chapter, what we read in the end, that's the product. Very good. So that's the product. So the literature review, when you need to think about it in both ways. You need to think about it as a process or an ongoing part of your research, which indicates that you're not going to just do the literature review before you submit or at the beginning of your research. No, you need to review the research since day one until after you even submit, because new studies come in every day. You need to be up to date with the studies that have been published. So you need to keep on reading. You need to know what is in the literature. The product, of course, what you have written, if you're satisfied with it. Let me tell you something. The product, you may never be 100% satisfied with it, but at one point, either because you hit a deadline, or maybe because you hit the word number, or maybe because you feel that you are done, but really you don't feel that you don't finish the writing. You just need to come to a point where you feel when you say, okay, I'm going to stop now, and this is what I have. This is the best that I can do, and I hope they like it. This is where you get, and that's the product. But you need to think that the product is never going to be perfect, because writing is not perfect. Okay, so the literature review, again, when you come to think of it as a process, you need to, before you see the step number 7, right? The literature review. There are 6 steps before that. There is so much to do before you even get to the writing. So the writing is just the final step. What do you need to do first? First, you need to identify the key terms. What are the most important ideas that you need to include in your research? Mainly, sometimes there are 2 or 3 variables that you need to have. And then you need to formulate an initial problem. You need to think, what is it that I want to investigate? What is missing in the literature that I want to investigate? After that, you need to locate the literature online or maybe in the library. You need maybe to go to the Saudi Digital Library. Maybe you need to go to the KAU library. Maybe you can go to the internet. But please, please, please never go to Wikipedia, ever. Wikipedia is not a source for researchers. Wikipedia is for general readers. It's not for us. Okay? After that, after you've collected maybe, let's say if you're working on a PhD, you need to think, if you're working, of course, on a PhD thesis, maybe in the arts, you might end up with maybe 200 or 300 pages of writing of the thesis. For that, you might feel that you need a lot of studies. So you initially download so many research studies. Let's say you start maybe with 50 or 100. How do you choose between them? How do you choose which ones are good, which ones are bad, which ones are the most important, which ones are the ones that you need to exclude? You need to critically evaluate them and choose between them or choose from them. You're not going to include every research study you find online or you find in your search in your writing. That's not going to happen. Okay. After that, after you've maybe collected an initial group of studies, you're going to organize them in what we call a literature matrix. Are you familiar with the matrix? Have you ever come across it before, if I may ask? No? Oh, so you might learn something today, inshallah. Good, alhamdulillah. Uh, so maybe I'd say 20% know what it is. Wow, okay. So maybe this is something that you're going to remember me by, hopefully, inshallah. So what we mean by the matrix, it's kind of like an organizational chart that you put the most important information that you find in the studies that you read. Okay, and you organize these studies in kind of like this chart. You can have it even on a Word document. Okay, and then you extract the most important information from it and you add that to the writing of the literature review. After you organize the sources of the matrix, yes, I'm going to discuss it, Mr. Bender. I'm going to discuss it later on, but I wanted to know if you're familiar with it or not. After the matrix, or after you're done maybe with organizing the literature, you need to outline your writing. You need to think, what is it that I want to write about? You need to think how I'm going to present the material that I have, because it's not a summary. Again, if you think of it as a summary, you have not succeeded. But if you think of the material that you have as evidence to support the most important point that you have, that you use it to build an argument or to support an argument, then you are good and then you are successful. And then your supervisor is going to say, wow, your literature review is amazing. You can move on and go to the next step. Finally, you can go to writing the literature review. And believe me, I think I might know about this because I've done it before. At one stage of doing my research, when I started with writing the literature review, I got stuck. But in other stages, with other times when I tried to follow these steps, even if not all of them 100%, but at least as much as I can, and I try to critically evaluate the sources, try to organize the matrix, I tried to build an argument and did some kind of an outline, then the writing maybe took me 2 or 3 days maximum. The writing can, as long as you're organized, the writing will not take time. But if you're not organized, unfortunately, the writing will take so much time. So this is kind of like an advice that came from my own experience. I hope that you find it helpful. So when to write the literature review? As I was saying before, you need to write the literature review throughout your project, throughout your thesis, your term paper, your research paper, throughout the process, since day one, even before you chose the research problem you started to read in the literature. When do you stop? After you submit. So you start with taking notes, you prepare the literature matrix, you write small sections as you go along throughout the project. It's not just writing it, as I said, in one sitting. You need to work on it extensively throughout an extended period of time. How many words can you afford to spend on the literature review? A lot of questions actually at the writing center, we get this question a lot. How many questions should the literature review be? And I always tell the students, go check within your field, check the papers that are published in your field. If for some fields, they have extended literature reviews. Some fields have only a page or a page and a half out of, let's say, 50 pages. It depends. But in general, it's about a third of the word count. I'm not going to say 2,000 words, 5,000 words. I can't, because it depends again. Again, it depends on the major, it depends on the university, it depends on a lot. Again, everything I'm going to talk about today actually depends. And you're going to hear this word a lot. But in general, it's about a third of the word count. So if you come to think of the research paper, like the introduction, the literature review, the methodology, the analysis, the conclusion, the discussion, so many sections. The literature review is like third of it. It's a lot. So it's kind of like the cornerstone of your paper. If it's good, then your paper is successful. If it's deficient, unfortunately, it's going to be lacking. Okay, so this is kind of like a trick question, but let me ask you. The literature review or section is the second to last thing you finalize. What's the last thing you finalize when in writing? So the literature review, you should start working on it or reading in it from day one until before you submit or after you submit even. So the last thing you finalize, or the one thing before the last thing you finalize, is the literature review. What's the last thing you finalize? Anyone knows? Not the recommendation, the introduction. Some fields have an abstract instead of an introduction. I don't know. But in general, it's the introduction. The introduction should be the last thing you finalize in the research paper or in the thesis. Why? Because it has all of the most important information that you have. It includes the objectives. Exactly, Dr. Ikram. Thank you. It includes the objectives. It includes what you're going to discuss in the study itself. It includes so much, and it needs to be up to date, because if you write the introduction before you finish with everything else, you're going to rewrite it. It's not going to be good, because things are going to change. So the one thing before the last that you're going to finalize is the literature review. After it, you're going to finalize the introduction. Okay. So I told you about the steps of doing the literature review. When you come to think about critically choosing and evaluating the literature or the sources that we have, critically choosing and evaluating the literature, how do you choose? As I said, I sometimes personally get excited and I download up to 100 or 200 papers sometimes. I get excited and I see a lot, so yes, I download them. But then when I look through them, I find them they're not useful to me. So what do I do? How do I choose between them? You need to think. You need to think: is it a good, accurate source, and is it relevant? When I say a good, accurate source, what do I mean? I mean that you need to rely on related studies that are related to your field. They need to be specialized, and again, they need to be peer-reviewed journals. Try to have as many peer-reviewed journals as possible. How do you know if it's peer-reviewed? It's going to say on the website of the journal itself. You're going to find this piece of information in the website itself. Okay? And try to look for research studies that consist of data collection and analysis, so that you can compare your result with theirs. If you have a lot of theoretical studies, especially if you are maybe in the scientific fields, you won't have any studies to compare your study with or your results with. No, you need to have studies that have a lot of data collection and analysis in order for you to compare later on in the discussion, maybe. And you also need to think, is this study relevant? What do I mean by relevant? In terms of the topic. Is the topic the same or not? Are the variables that you're talking about the same or not? If, let's say, if you have three variables and one variable only is being discussed in this study, that means that it's not enough. You need to find more. But if you have, let's say, for example, two variables, but none of them are mentioned in this study, then you can't use it. It's not going to be good for you. You need to exclude it. You need to also think of individual and site relevance. Let's say if your study, for example, is consistent mainly of female participants, and all of the references that you found are male participants, you need to first ask yourself why, and you need to find studies with female participants. You need to find relevant individuals. Also, you need to find site relevance, meaning what? meaning that if you're conducting your study as a case study specific to Saudi Arabia or specific to Jeddah or specific to a specific hospital, maybe, is your are there any other studies that have been published about the same place or the same site or the same setting? If yes, include them. If no, this could consist of a gap, because if you can't find studies done on female participants, on participants only in male, this could be gap. If you can't find the study done maybe on a group of participants of a specific age in a specific area, that could constitute a gap as well. But you need to look into it more, actually. And you also need to think in terms of the relevance as the problem and question relevance. Are the problems similar in a sense in between your own problem and the problem in the study that you're reading? Are the questions similar or not? And one very important aspect as well you need to keep in mind is accessibility relevance. What do I mean by accessibility? Can you access this journal article or not? Do you need to purchase it or not? Does the library at your university give you credit to buy this piece of research or not? If yes, good. If not, and you can find another study, go ahead and get that study. But if not, you might actually need to buy it. Sometimes you do, especially if you're working on a PhD level. But in an MA level, sometimes you might find kind of like a substitution in a sense. So all of these are somewhat going to help you think about the studies that you have. You need to think about them critically. Are they going to be useful for me or not? Okay, and of course, after you are done with this stage, which is about collecting the studies and choosing between them, critically evaluate them, then you need to come and think about organizing them. If you end up, again, if you're doing a PhD and you end up with maybe 100 or 120 references, what do you do? Of course, the first step that you need to do is to download the possible sources to EndNote. EndNote, of course, it's a software that helps you organize your references. Or maybe you have them in a folder, but try as much as you can to be as organized as possible, especially in the first stages. Because if you're not organized in the first stages, you're going to find a lot of difficulties in the end, unfortunately. Okay, so you need to then scan through the studies and take notes of the author, the date, the topics or the subtopics, the research questions, the data collection, the major findings. This is what we call scanning. You need to scan through the paper. Don't read it from cover to cover. Just scan it. See if it's useful or not. Get a hint of, or get a sense of what it includes. Okay? Another thing, please, do not just rely on the abstract of the article. Don't just read the abstract and write about the abstract. Try to read the whole paper. Because if you're only reading the abstract and you include this specific paper in your literature review, this constitutes plagiarism. Because you haven't actually read the entire paper, but it's kind of like you are claiming that you have. So اختصر الوقت على نفسك أو اختصر الوقت على نفسك, read the entire thing, and then if it's suitable for you, include it in your literature review. After you are done with the initial organizing and you have a good list in front of you of studies that you want to include in your literature review, you can develop a literature matrix. A matrix, it's kind of like a table or a chart. That's what we mean with a matrix. So what is it? The matrix or the literature matrix, it's a chart that allows you to categorize different arguments presented in the literature on a topic. It's going to help you it's going to help you organize like the articles that you're going to include in the research, as well as the information that are in the article themselves. It allows you to assess the strengths and weaknesses of each study and consider the similarities and differences between them. I'll show you how in a minute. I have a few examples of literature matrices in the next slide. But in general, in each row of the matrix, or each row of the matrix contains a summary of the major aspects of a study, which are the ones that you have scanned already, like the author, the date, the topic of the study, the research questions, the hypotheses, the data collection procedures, the results, and kind of like the most important information of the study. And try as much as you can at this stage when you are inputting the information in the matrix to add your notes. What do I mean by your notes? Your opinion. What do you like about this study? What don't you like about this study? What actually caught your attention in this study or not? Your reflection, your evaluation, your critique, all of these are important, and all of these elements are you are going to actually include them in the writing of the literature review at the next stages. Okay. So I have an example of a literature review, a literature matrix here, and it's quite simple. As you can see, we have 3 rows. Each of them is about a sorry, it seems that I have been muted. I hope you can hear me now. Good. So the first study is by Diane Malcolm, 2004. The second one is by Chuck, 2004. Also, the third one is by Eng Kui Kwan, 2005. So the columns are the information in the study itself, like the purpose, the research questions, the participants, the context, and all of the other different information. You can try to add another column that says notes, and try to add any note that you have regarding the study. This study. This is going to help you with 2 things. First, organizing the literature. Second, it's going to help you get to grasp or get to understand what is being said in the literature. It's going to get you to notice what are the similarities. You're going to see a lot of studies maybe conducted in one area, but not so many have been conducted in this area or that thing. You're going to notice some patterns, and these patterns are the field in a sense. So this is kind of like a simple matrix, and this one is a more complex one. And it's divided not according to the research study, it's divided according to the topic. You can do this as a second stage, or you can start with it. It's completely up to you, or you can just rely on the more simple one, up to you. So this one, the topic is Women in World War II. Okay. So the first topic is alteration of women's roles because of World War II. And the second topic is hardships and oppositions women faced. And in the columns, we have the studies: Conson, Stewart, Broley, and Scott. And we have some pieces of information. What I like about this one, as you can see, maybe you can see the arrow here, the 1940s brought more opportunities to women than ever before. And then we have P26. What's P26? That's the page number. So you see how detailed this is? Why is this beneficial? Because if you're going to use this piece of information in the writing, you can quite easily find the page number. You have the date, and we don't have the date here, but we have the page number. You can add the page number and you're done. So you don't need to find the pieces of these kinds of pieces of information later on to cite them. They're right in front of you in the matrix. You're going to make this so much easier for you. And if you divide the matrix according to the topic, this is going to help you in organizing the literature writing, kind of like an essay. The first topic is going to be maybe the first heading, and you're going to discuss study 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the second topic, you're going to discuss study 1, 2, and 3. What do you notice here? In the first topic, we have 4 studies, but in the second topic, we have only 3. This means what? This means that the first topic is discussed more than the second. there might be a gap here. We don't know. I don't know because this is not my field, but I'm just trying to get you to maybe think about these kinds of things. It might be a gap. Yes, you never know. So if you have different topics, you find one topic discussed in so many studies, but one topic is only discussed in 2 or 3 studies. That means what? It means that there might be a gap there, and you need to investigate it more. Okay, so maybe further studies need, or your own study can take this topic and actually work on it, maybe. Okay, so as you work on the literature matrix, you will notice why is it helpful? Why is it going to help you? Because when you work on it, as I said, apart from it being an organizational tool, it's going to help you notice patterns of information, as sources could discuss similar material or deal with completely different aspects of the topic. You're going to see what's similar and what's different between the studies. And you're going to also notice gaps, as some sources may not cover all the main ideas of the columns, which gives clues about gaps in the field. As I told you about, like, the first topic having 4 different studies and the second topic having only maybe 3 studies. That means what? That means there might be a gap there. I'm not 100% certain. You need to investigate this more, but this could be. Mr. Bender uses a mind map to cover the related article. Yes, this is just one way of organizing. A mind map is another one, is another good one as well. But for me, a mind map, it doesn't work for me. I think it's not as organized as a table. I need organization in my life. That's why I like the literature matrix. But a lot of people enjoy the mind map. I can see that, and I salute you, as long as you use something to help you before you start writing. Good. So what you need to do is you need to use these patterns to create a thesis statement for the literature review. Everything you notice while you are doing the literature matrix is going to help you in the writing. You're going to have a point of view as a result of all the reading and organizing that you are doing. And then you are going to develop a thesis statement. You're going to have a point of view. You're going to have an argument. And maybe the different topics that you come up with, these can help you in doing the outline. The first topic can be maybe the first section of the literature review. The second topic can be the second section, third topic, third section, etc. And these are going to help to keep you focused as you begin your literature review draft. As I said, writing the literature review is the last stage. But before that comes a lot of work, and you need to work on those as much as you can. Okay, so now we move on to outlining the literature review. When you try to outline, how can you do that? Oops, sorry. So when you try to outline, that actually again depends on. It depends. It depends on maybe someone's got their mic on. Sorry. That depends on the needs of your research questions. What is it that you want to answer? If you've got 3 research questions, you need to have 3 different sections in the literature review. What's your main focus? What are you focusing on? What are the key debates in the field? If there are key debates in the field, you can't ignore them. You have to add them. How? You need to think about that. What are the theoretical or conceptual frameworks you are following? How much of those are you following? What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? All of this needs to go in the outline of the literature review. And what are, again, the gaps in the research? The gaps are extremely important, and the literature review needs to actually lead to them. So all of these elements, you need to think about them as you are doing the outline. Sorry. Oh, there you go. So when you are writing, one of the nice things I noticed in the workshops last week, a lot of the people discuss the writing that you write from general to specific. And I was actually quite glad, because this is actually what I'm going to discuss today. And you need to think about writing the literature review as a funnel. the attendees who are in the scientific fields, you know what a funnel is? Or maybe even anyone who's not in the scientific fields, anyone. What's a funnel? قمع, صح? Am I correct? This is how you pronounce it? Yes, good. So the funnel is القمع. And in it, you start, you need to think like with the قمع طبعا, or with the funnel, you start with, let's say, the general, and you end up with the specific. What do I mean by that? You start with the broad issues in the literature, in the writing, and then you go down to the studies that overlap with your research. Studies that overlap with your research in terms of the topic, maybe in terms of the variable, in terms of the site, the setting, a lot of different things maybe. And then you only discuss the studies that directly relate to your investigation. So you need to organize. You look at the matrix and you say, okay, this study is close, this study is closer, this study is exactly what I'm talking about. So you're going to discuss study 1 first, study study 2 second, and then study 3rd, study 3 finally. And after that, you're going to discuss the research gap. That's the end of the funnel. الهرم المقلوب. صحيح يا حورية. Thank you so much. General to specific. That's how the writing should go. So the studies that you have, you need to think about the overlap. How much of the studies overlap with your own research? If the study doesn't overlap with your own research at all, unfortunately, you'll have to exclude it. But if it overlaps, let's say 10% or 15% or maybe 20%, this can go in the broad issues. If it overlaps, maybe let's say 50 or 60%, it goes in the studies that overlap with your research. But if it overlaps like 90, 95%, then it goes to the studies that are closest to the research gap to you. Okay? This is what we mean by the literature review being a funnel. So one of the ways that you can write the literature review is you can write it as an argumentative literature review. And that's going to make it so much better and so much clearer to the reader. Basically, literature reviews can either be a summary or can either be argumentative. They can't be both. It's either this or that, because the way you write a summary is different from the way that you write an argument. In an argument, you use the studies as support, as evidence. But in a summary, you're talking about the study in general. You're not telling me what you think about it. No, I need you to tell me what you think about it. Mr. Abdul Rahman is asking, is it better to write in this way? This is my suggestion to you. If you feel that you would like to use it, that's good. If you feel that you've got another better way of writing, please go ahead and do that. I can't decide. Better than the what do you mean by the historical method, please? So while you answer that, I'll try to give you the definition of an argumentative literature review. The argumentative literature review presents a logically argued case. It's logic, it's argument. It's founded on comprehensive understanding of the current state of knowledge about the topic. This case establishes a convincing thesis to answer the study's questions. You've got a point of view and you're trying to convince the reader of it. And it's basically, again, a written argument that promotes a thesis position by building a case from what? We're building a case from what? From credible evidence based on the previous research. So as I was saying, the way you tackle the previous research in a summary is different from the way you tackle it in an argument. In an argument, you're using it as support. You're using it as evidence. You're not using it as a summary. They're totally different writing styles. Okay? So if you try to look at this, I don't know, graph or drawing or whatever it is, this is one way of building an argument. Kind of like it's the most common way and the simplest way of doing it. So how can you build an argumentative literature review? Of course, the first step is the studies that you have collected. And that's going to be, what do you think? The claim, the warrant, or the evidence? What do you think? The studies that you have collected and you want to include in the literature review. Is this going to be the claim, the evidence, or the warrant? Exactly. This is going to be the evidence. And it needs to have some qualities. It needs to be of good quality. It needs to be relevant, as we mentioned. It needs to be credible, believable. It needs to be precise, and it needs to be organized. How can it be organized? Through a literature matrix or maybe a mind map, as some of you like to use. So this is the first step, the evidence. But it's going to be evidence to what? It's an evidence to what? It's an evidence to a claim or a fact or a concept or an interpretation. What is your thesis point? What's your point of view that you want to convince the reader with? Of course, this point of view needs to have like some qualities. It needs to be on point. It needs to be very specific. It needs to be strong. You can't have a very weak claim. It needs to be a strong claim. It needs to be supportable, meaning what? If you are saying, for example, my claim is the sun rises from the west. This is scientifically impossible because the sun rises from the east. It's not supportable by scientific evidence, so it's not a good claim. It's not even a strong claim. It's not even on point. Okay, you need to be able to support it with good evidence, and it needs to be understandable. If you can't understand it, other people will not. This is it. You need to understand the claim that you are discussing, and other people will understand it as well. And of course, a lot of us, or like when I started to work with the argumentative literature review, I found it difficult to connect between the evidence that I have and the claim that I want to claim. And the way that you connect between them is called a warrant or a justification. How do you justify using the evidence to support this claim? There is a link that you need to specify or mention to the reader, because if you're not going to mention it, the reader will not know. How can you link between the evidence and the claim? What's the logical bridge between them? I've got an example, of course, of a literature review, maybe outline that uses this method. I hope that I can actually explain it to you as much as I can. If you would like to take a look at the literature review itself, I'm more than happy to email it to you if you like. I'll give you my email at the end. Abdul Rahman says that one of the methods historical dates, maybe because of the field that you're working on, Mr. Abdul Rahman. It could be. So when I'm talking about the argumentative literature review, so as I said, the starting point for me was I've got a few. This is actually from a study that I have conducted myself personally. And I try to, as much as I can, to explain it to you as possible. If I fail in that, I apologize. But as I said, I started with the evidence, and the evidence is Cohen, 1981, Macedonia et al., 2011, Macedonia and Klimish, 2014, Macedonia and Van Kringston, 2012. Different studies that talk about one topic, which is called the enactment effect hypothesis. It's a theory in psychology, and it basically states, or neuropsychology in detail, and it basically states that when we abstract concepts, we remember them. In order to remember, you need to act. It's kind of like a give and take. If you think about it, when you actually move around as you're trying to memorize a theory, you're going to remember it better than when you're sitting down, because movement gets the brain working. I don't know how, but it does. So I tried to use this theory in my research, which was about using metaphor awareness with language learners. And my claim was that actions can aid metaphor retention. So the studies, as I said, that I have, these are 4 studies. Of course, I think I ended up with 9. I've got four here. Each of them tackled the topic from a different perspective. One of them worked with a real language, and another one worked with an artificial language. The third one, maybe I remember, worked with robots, not humans. But all of them tackled the same hypothesis, testing the effectiveness of this hypothesis, which was called the enactment effect hypothesis. Of course, for me, I can't just come in and discuss all of these studies in general. No, I have to actually come at a specific point of view and discuss them from a specific point of view. And that's what I tried to do with the warrant. So as I said, my claim was that actions can get the students to remember the words that I'm teaching them. And the hypothesis that I'm using as evidence is called the enactment effect hypothesis. So my warrant was, in short, it was, I'm going to read it to you if that's okay. A significant advantage of employing action metaphor awareness to teach metaphoric expressions is the possible benefits it has for memory. The enactment effect hypothesis by Engelkamp and Krummacher in 1980 emphasizes that performing activities which correspond to the meaning of words helps in remember them. That's what the hypothesis states. And I've got evidence that this hypothesis actually actually works. And they are 4 different studies. So the way that I presented my literature review was kind of supportive to my claim, which is actions aid metaphor awareness. Of course, when I was done with discussing each of these studies, I discussed them one by one. When I finished discussing them one by one, I had kind of like a wrap-up or a further warrant to bring everything together. And I said, since metaphoric vocabulary describes abstract concepts, the enactment effect studies, the studies that I mentioned or I discussed with you so far, serve as further evidence of the usefulness of enactment in figurative language teaching. Of course, I'm using a lot of technical language here, but I hope that you get the gist of it. That I'm using these studies not as a summary, but I'm using them as evidence to support the point of view that I have and I want to convince the reader with. Is this clear to you? I hope it is. Or would you like me to discuss this again? Great. Anyone else? Discuss it again? So as I was saying, clear as day, nice. So I'm going to discuss it one last time. I've got a few studies. I'm not mentioning them one by one in detail, but I'm mentioning them as support to the hypothesis that I've got, which is using actions will help memory. And I use these studies as evidence. I have the warrant. I have kind of like the justification for discussing this. And when I finish with discussing the studies, I also kind of like recap the main point that I'm trying to make and say that these studies tell me or show us scientifically that we remember things when we act them. Then if I use this method in language teaching, I might get a positive result. I hope this makes it easier for you. So again, I'm not using the studies as summary. I'm using them as evidence to support my claim. Okay? So let's move to the next step. How can you build an argumentative literature review? You need to only select the studies that serve your argument. Only select the studies that serve your argument. Again, you can't mention every study you pass by. Do not summarize, or recite the arguments of other scholars. Try to outline the literature in a way that tells a story to your audience. If you think about it as telling a story, that's going to make it easier for you. Start with an argumentative thesis statement, which makes it clear to the reader What is your conclusion about what to come? Don't be vague. Be as clear as day. I like this. I don't know what so someone in the chat mentioned clear as day. Through topic and concluding sentences, try and end every paragraph with your own idea. So don't end with what other people have said. End with what you have said. Be in control of the writing or in control of the information given. Support the thesis statement by discussing each source you present and cite it accurately. Make sure to cite in an accurate way. And then try to structure the paragraphs with clear, purposeful topic sentences. Interpret each source in your own way, on your own words, in a clear, straightforward way. Do not quote too much, but try to paraphrase and summarize. If you quote too much, then it's not your work, it's other people's work. Try to avoid a lot of quotes. 2 or 3 are enough. Comment on and evaluate the sources for your reader so that it is clear how you reach the conclusion you argued in the thesis statement. Try to contextualize your description of each source by framing it with a few sentences of your own that you have written to indicate what you thought about it. Always comment, always contextualize, always discuss what the other studies. Because again, it's not a summary, it's what you think about the studies that you're discussing. Okay? If you find a problem or maybe a gap with a study, explain your reasons objectively. Try to avoid emotive attacking language that detracts from the argument. Do not attack the studies. The argument is not an attack. It's more about a logical, scientific argument. You're saying there are some issues with the study, and they are 1, 2, 3. Some studies have discussed these issues, and what we can do is this. Do not use emotive attacking language. Try to be as unbiased as possible. And when you conclude the literature review, try to summarize the major themes in the literature and emphasize the major ideas of each heading in your essay. So if you've got 4 main ideas, try to discuss them one by one. Emphasize them again. Suggest 3 or 4 reasons why the current literature is deficient, why there are some problems or gaps in the literature, and why the researchers should investigate this topic. In other words, why am I investigating this topic? And then address ways the proposed study will add to the knowledge and address the questions that we're trying to answer, and justify the importance of the research problem. This is the way of doing an argumentative literature review that actually speaks for you. I'm not sure if you've heard this expression before or not, but always try to write with your voice. Try to write as if you are talking. Try to have a point of view. When you're doing an MA, a PhD, or graduate studies in general, try to speak through the writing. And this is one way of doing it, maybe. So when you're done with the writing, read each paragraph out loud and ask yourself, does this sound like something I would say? Again, write with your voice. Because a lot of the time when you read out loud what you have written, you think this sounds weird. This doesn't make sense. At first, of course, you're going to laugh, but all of this is good because it's going to make you rewrite it in a better way. And when you rewrite it again, or you work on it again and again, it's going to be better. After you are finished, try to leave the writing for a few days and come back to it again. Why would you need to do that? When you're done with the writing, you need to leave it for a few days and come back to it again. Fresh eyes, exactly. Critical thinking, because you need to look at it with the clear eye. You need to look at it and see what are the issues, because you've become blind of your own mistakes, and you need to تحتاج الغشاوة تنشال عن عينك. Try to read it as the reader, not as the writer. Exactly. And the next step, of course, you need to get someone else to look at it. get outside opinion and writing assistance. And this is one of the things that we can offer you at the Writing Center. We have thesis coach appointments in which you show us your writing for 60 minutes, and we tell you what you can do to make it better. We try to make you a better writer. So please come to us. I've got the website in here, and I hope you're familiar with it. Okay, so I've got this, and it's quite nice. It's kind of like the general discussion to everything, or like the general summary to everything we've said so far. When you come to think of the literature review, I want you to think of it as an essay. An essay usually has an introduction, it has body, and it has a conclusion. In the introduction, you can have maybe 1 or 2 paragraphs. You can have some definitions, context, the importance. I'll give you the website at the end. Maybe Dr. Basim can put it for you in the chat box. You can also have the aims and the intentions, the scope, and the key themes, like the most important things. And then in the body, you need to explain the key themes. What you need to explain them one by one. You need to highlight the importance of everything that you're discussing. You need to draw conclusions. You need to provide some expert views, theories, include all of the relevant materials that you've prepared before you started to write. Of course, the body is going to be like the biggest chunk of writing. And finally, you have the conclusion. Again, the conclusion, maybe it can be 1 or 2 paragraphs or more or less, depending on the way that you write. You need to outline in the conclusion, you need to outline the current knowledge, and you need to identify the areas not yet addressed or the gaps. If you think of the literature review as an essay, at the beginning you have an introduction, at the end you have the conclusion. The chunk of writing, the biggest chunk of writing, you have it in the middle, in the body. It makes it easier for you. It's all about preparation and understanding of the process of doing the literature review. Okay, so I think someone mentioned in the chat, you need to think about the writing as a reader, not as the writer. And this is the point that I would like to focus on now. We're coming close to the end, actually. When you are done with the writing, you've edited, you sent it to the Writing Center, you sat with one of our teachers, you looked at the issues, you finished everything. You need to think of the writing, or you need to think of the literature review as if you are a supervisor or an examiner. The supervisor or the examiner will have a checklist with them to see if the literature review is good or not. They need to ask, or they're going to ask, do you see the research studies or the research cited that you expected to see? Who are the big players in the field? Are you mentioning them or not? If not, you need to mention them. Is it reported accurately? A lot of students find problems or find difficulties with the accurate names of authors, the dates, the information, understanding the information, paraphrasing it in a way that doesn't take from the content. You need to think of it in an accurate way, or you need to write it in an accurate way. Has the writer understood what he or she has read? You're not just reporting. Do you understand what you read, what you've read? Are you able to evaluate it critically, especially again at the PhD level or above? You need to evaluate. Are you able to evaluate or not? You can't just work on the surface anymore. Is the writer's own voice apparent? Can I hear you speaking through the writing? If yes, good. If not, unfortunately, you'll have to write it again. A lot of supervisors send the draft back to their students, saying that this doesn't make sense. That doesn't sound like you. If you're familiar with these expressions or not, you need to work on this again. This is just a summary. It's because of these kinds of issues. Does the review make a clear argument? Are you arguing for a point of view or not? Does it lead to the writer's own work? Does the literature review take you from the general to the more specific, to finally the the research questions and the methodology and the data collection and analysis and all of that. Does it take you step by step to that or not? If not, unfortunately, you haven't succeeded. If yes, good for you. Excellent. Someone is asking, how can I write by my voice? You need, again, you need to write not as if you're writing a summary, you're not reporting. You are discussing what you read. You have a point of view. Exactly, Ms. Hiba, thank you. You have a point of view. You are telling the reader what you believe. You are talking through writing. You are confident enough to, to tell the reader that I have a point of view and I can support it with evidence, 1, 2, 3, 4 studies. And based on this evidence, I can see that the literature is lacking. Some studies do not discuss this point, while other studies do not discuss this point. I will talk about this point. This is what you're trying to do. You're trying to talk to the reader. I hope that it's clearer for you now, Mr. Akram. Okay. So finally, you need to please try to build an argument, not a library. It's not a summary, it's an argument. If you build a library, the supervisor will send you the draft back and ask you to write again, and you're going to get into a deep depression. Do not do that. Because I've been through that. I'm telling you, do not do that. Start right. Start to actually have a point of view and try to prove it through the studies that you have as evidence. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, for participating, for writing in the chat. I've got a few references here, and I've got a few also online sources that might help you. If you'd like to take a screenshot, maybe, you are more than welcome. And please, if you have any questions, I don't know, Dr. Basim, can they ask some questions now? How much time do we have?
All right, first, let me thank you. This is very full of information, for a very informative presentation. We really enjoyed it. Different types, different techniques, and how to write literature review. So thank you again. Thank you a lot. I'm going to share with you 2 links now. The first one is about the evaluation form, and the second one is the YouTube, our YouTube channel. So inshallah, we will upload this wonderful workshop within 24 hours, inshallah. So now let's open the floor for questions. If you have any questions, comments you would like to ask, you can write them in the chat here, or you just open your mic and ask your question. Yes, Banda, go ahead.
Yes, hi, how are you? Can you hear me well?
Alhamdulillah. Yes, thank you.
Dr. Rawan, I would like to thank you first. I would add some point to your presentation here.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, maybe I think there is a difficulty in finding the gaps for especially PhD students. I may advise them to read systematic reviews or find some limitation on articles or any future studies referred in the articles itself. I'm not really sure. I followed the way you were talking about how to write a literature review, but I am in a way or another stuck right now. As you mentioned before, you were stuck in the past. I have read a lot of articles, and I made a short list of about articles written in the previous 5 years. So now, what should I do when I was in this stuck point, as you did before? Just advise me. And
what do you do when you are stuck? You're stuck with what, if I may ask?
As I said, I read a lot of articles, and I summarized each articles, and I found.
And you don't know where to go from there.
Yeah, I have a research topic.
Okay.
But what I need actually, it's about the literature review and the objective itself. How should I write about? So maybe this is stuck with me.
Maybe you can start with organizing the studies. As I said, try to maybe, this is again a suggestion, it might work for you, it might not.
Yeah.
Maybe you can organize the studies by themes. What are they talking about? Like you've got 5 studies talking about theme 1, let's say 2 different studies talking about theme 2, 10 studies talking about theme 3. That means what? That a lot of the studies are talking about this, so it should come first. It's the most general one, and this is what you're going to write about first. And then you're going to take the first theme, which had maybe 5 or 6 studies, and then the theme that's got not so many studies discussing it, but you find it very important, and this is the area that you want to focus on maybe, and it has the gap that's what you might have at the end. What sounds to me is that you're stuck at doing an outline. Am I correct?
What I mean really here, I would like actually to evaluate the process of something done before in some region, and I would like to apply it here in my country. So if I want to, there is some articles that covered in some region and others in other regions, and some covered some points and other refer to some points. So I collected them together and to evaluate this way in my country.
You know what my advice is?
Yes.
Maybe when this session is uploaded to YouTube, listen to yourself now, and this point that you just mentioned is your starting point.
Maybe.
Because sometimes when you talk about what you've done with someone else, it becomes clearer for you. So it sounds to me that you're there. You just don't know it yet.
Yeah, exactly.
That you've got some studies being performed on one thing, but they're not performed here. Here we've got this or that. This is what you need to talk about maybe.
Yeah.
Investigate this more.
Absolutely, sure. Thank you for the advice.
You are more than welcome.
All right.
You are more than welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Vendor. Thank you, Dr. Rawan. So we have another question here from Lama. Can we use the pronoun I in the literature? And what about the best place to mention our gaps?
Can you use I? Of course, that depends on the field. A lot of fields do not like the use of I. Some fields like the use of, let's say, what is it? Not the third person, no, but the passive voice. Thank you, Ms. Sumaya. Yes, the passive voice. Some fields, especially the scientific fields, like the use of the passive voice rather than the active voice. Some fields like the use of I. My advice is, as I said in the beginning, if you were there, try to look at the studies in your field. If you find a lot of I's in these studies, then it's acceptable in your field to use it. But you might use I, and then your supervisor says that you shouldn't use it. It depends, again, honestly, on a lot of different things. My advice, if you end up using I, do not use it a lot. Only use it in very specific situations where it's going to highlight the point that you're discussing. Like, for example, after everything you've discussed in the literature review, therefore, I will do this, 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 and that in my study. Use the I here to highlight your aim. Only use it as support to the point you're trying to make. And you can actually discuss the point without using I. You can say, therefore, this study highlights this point, or something like that. You can use it in a direct way or an indirect way, depending, of course, again, on the field. The second point, what was it? It was about the use of I and...
the best place to mention our gaps.
The best place to mention the gap, of course, again, it depends. Some people like to mention the gaps throughout the literature review. Some people like to leave it until the end. For me, I like to I like to work as I see it. Sometimes I feel that I need to mention the gap immediately after the study. Sometimes I feel like, no, I want to leave the gap until the end. Honestly, it depends.
All right, we have a question here from Reem. What is the difference between conceptual and theoretical framework?
Oh, this is a tricky question. I think next week we're going to talk about methodology, right? The difference
We'll
between...
discuss about this question, inshallah, yeah. But you can
Inshallah,
just,
great.
okay, give like a general...
Because honestly, I can't tell you because I get confused between them. Honestly, in my research, I do not use either. So I try to not talk about something that I'm not completely sure of. I'm sorry about that, but inshallah, it's going to be mentioned in the next workshops, hopefully.
Yes, inshallah. This Wednesday, inshallah, we'll have a separate workshop about using writing methodology and method section. Good. So inshallah, we will tackle this question, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Stay tuned. So we have another question here from Abdul Awal, I guess, if I pronounce his name right. So
okay.
Should we have to find out only the gaps or further analyze the gaps and try to fill them?
It depends on what you want to do. If for example, if you're not working on a research paper, but your supervisor or your teacher has asked you to write an extended literature review or maybe a systematic review, try to work on a systematic review, and your aim is only to focus on what the research has done and it didn't do, then you're just going to discuss the gaps as extensively as possible. But if your aim is to actually develop a study or develop material and develop a methodology and work on some data and analyze it, then the gap that you're going to have needs to relate directly to the work that you're going to do. Honestly, it depends.
Okay, so how about the tense? What tense that is commonly used in literature review?
It depends.
Depends, yes.
It depends. But in general, we like to use the present tense. Try to use the present tense.
Okay.
The past tense, some fields, if you don't mind me talking, some fields like to use the past tense to discuss the studies that have been performed. But the literature review itself, it's done in the present tense. But when you discuss this specific study or the methodology of this specific study, you use the past tense. My advice is read the studies in your field, see what they're doing again, try to do the same. It depends from field to field.
Okay, we have another question here about conceptual and theoretical framework. We will postpone this until Wednesday. And let me see. Here, HS, I guess she's asking in Arabic لو نقدت أبحاث سابقة هل يفترض أن في بحثي أغطي كل ما نقدته في تلك الأبحاث أو يمكن كتابتها كرأي فقط والتركيز على نقطة واحدة؟
That I think depends on how many words you actually have. Do you have a lot of freedom in the writing to discuss each and every point you find, or to evaluate each and every study that you have? It might take you so much space that you don't need later on. If you do, that's good, that's great. But if you've got a research study out of like 2,500 words, you might not have enough space for that. You just need to focus on the gaps that you're going to cover. For me personally, what I like to do is I like to evaluate every study I write, because I tend to think while I'm writing. So when I'm finished, I see the space that I have for the literature review. As I said, I like to think about it in word numbers. If I've got, for example, 3,000 words, then I take away the evaluations that do not relate directly to the most important points I'm discussing. Again, everything you discuss needs to relate to the aim of your study. If you're just evaluating like for 3 pages or 5 pages on something that doesn't relate directly to the aim of your study, then it's a waste of space and time. You should try to avoid it. Honestly, again, it depends.
It depends. Okay, can I write, Budur here is asking, can I write the literature review as a comparison?
Of course, yes. That's actually a good kind of literature review if you compare. But you're comparing between what and what? Are you comparing between past and present states? Are you comparing between different views in the literature? Are you maybe comparing between different methodologies or different approaches to the research? You need to define what you are comparing first, but it's actually a good approach, and it's one of the argumentative approaches. I haven't actually discussed it, but it's very, very nice. One of the sources that I advise a lot of students to use, how can I go to it? Okay, it's this one called The Literature Review: 6 Steps to Success by Maki Lawrence, 2009. It discusses the different types of literature review, and it discusses, if I'm not mistaken, the comparative literature review. How can you actually organize this kind of literature review? Because it's going to be quite complex.
Okay, Akram here is asking, do I use the same ways in literature review writing when I write a proposal research?
In general, yes. In general, I would say yes. The techniques that I try to provide today apply to different aspects. Apply if you're working on a proposal, or if you're working on a thesis or an MA dissertation or a research paper. But again, it depends more on the field that you are in. Some things I mentioned might not apply to you. Some things might apply as well. So honestly, it depends. But in general, yes, the techniques that you're working with on the literature review for the proposal are similar to the actual literature review. The difference is going to be in the depth. Of course, in the proposal, you might end up with just 15 or 20 research papers or references. But in an MA thesis or a PhD thesis, you will end up with over 120 or 200 sometimes. It depends on the depth. Of course, the difference is in the depth and the length maybe, and the extensive research that you're going to do.
Right, thank you. Thanks a lot for answering all of these questions. Any other questions or comments, suggestions?
No, it's fine, Mr. Tariq. I'm perfectly fine. I tend to speak fast, honestly. It's
okay.
Fine. You are more than welcome.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you very much for the very informative presentation. I really enjoyed it, and I wrote a lot of notes. Actually, I am now at the point of writing the literature review, so thank you a lot. I have a question. My gap, I should write at the end with the conclusion? My gap, the gap in the literature.
Honestly, sorry, but it depends. Because my advice, do an outline. See if the gap looks good at the end or looks better in the middle. Most probably it looks better in the end, because it's going to be followed by the aim that you're going to do, what you're going to do in your study. So most probably if it's just one gap, it's going to be in the end. If it's a lot of gaps, you might discuss them throughout and re-mention them again in the end. They have to be mentioned in the end either way. But do you mention them throughout or not? Honestly, sometimes I write it in the middle, and then I take them and put them in the end, and then I go back. I work on it again and again. Sometimes I show it to my supervisor. When I had a supervisor doing my PhD, she would say, no, put them in the middle. Then she looks at it. She says, no, it's better to keep it in the end. It depends on like where the effect it gives the reader, I'd say.
Okay, so how long should the gap take? How many sentences so I can write about the gap?
I think you know the answer to that.
Excuse me?
I think you know the answer to that.
I mean, you mean depends on the word?
It depends, yes.
Yeah, but no, I know, I know that the word count is important.
It depends on the word count. It depends on the point that you want to make. You might be able to make the point in one sentence. You might be able to make it in 2 sentences. You might need an extended paragraph or 2 paragraphs to talk about it. And
okay.
it might, of course, it depends if you're working again on a research paper, if you're working on a thesis. It depends on a lot of different things. But my advice, maybe one or 2 paragraphs again, but also it depends.
Yeah, so I can write about 2 paragraphs because it is very important. So
Yeah, of course, the gap is the cornerstone of the literature review. If you don't have the gap, why did you do the literature review at the beginning?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so another question. Sorry, Doctor, but if I found if I found a quotation within an article I want to put in my research, but I did not use the citation for this article. The other author that I took his article included this citation or this quotation. So how can I refer to this quotation in my research?
So this quotation is mentioned in the other study, but it wasn't actually written by this author, right? It's written by a previous author. What you need to do is one of two things. Number one, you either find the original study that this quote is taken from and read it and understand it very well, then use the quote from it and directly reference that study. If for any reason you can't find it because it's very old maybe, or because it's in a different language, or for any other reasons, or you can't find it online, or it's maybe you need to pay for it or something like that, one way of doing the referencing, if you're using APA, I don't know the referencing style that you are using, but you need to refer to the referencing style that you are using and see how to reference this kind of quote. In APA, you can say, let's say, for example, John's 2013 cited in David 2019. This is how you phrase it in APA. The way you phrase it depends on, but you either go to the original reference, or you indicate to the reader that you haven't read the original reference, but you've read this reference which mentioned this quote. And the way you phrase this is you're going to find that in the referencing style you are using for your research.
Yes, okay, thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you.
You are welcome.
And I'm sorry about the noise. Kids are fighting.
No, it's fine.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
You are welcome.
Okay, if you still have any questions here, we have two. Amal here is asking, I guess I'm going to address this question. Are we going to get a workshop on how to write a proposal? Actually, this series contains a list of workshops that will help you in writing your proposal. So now we have been having 3 workshops until now. The first one is fundamental. The second one is the introduction, how to write the introduction section. And in general, this one here is how to write a literature review. And Wednesday, inshallah, we'll have another workshop, which is about how to write a methodology or section or chapter. So this series, and inshallah, next week we'll have, in the coming 2 weeks, inshallah, we'll have 4 more workshops about citation, about plagiarism, how to avoid plagiarism, and inshallah we'll have, let me see the list here, editing and revising skills, and the last one, how to write a successful abstract for a conference. So this series is actually for graduate students. So inshallah, if you have any suggestions or any sort of workshops, please show us an email or write them here in the evaluation form. And inshallah, next semester we'll have another and more series, inshallah, for, relating to academic writing. But for now, this series is dedicated for graduate students. Reem here. Peer-reviewed vendor here. We really need a peer review service. Could we have the list again? Which list, Ala? And here, I don't know, Reem, I don't get her question. If I write critical literature review, it showed an argumentative literature review in appearance. I don't know if this is a comment or a question.
I'm not sure as I understand it, honestly. If the
Yes.
person who wrote it is present, maybe they can open the mic and ask directly.
Okay, so Reem, if you can open the mic or rewrite your question, we still have time if you have questions, more questions or comments. So if you don't have questions or comments, so I think then we need to finish here. All right, so email, okay, I will write it down now. Okay, so then thank you all. I would like first to thank Dr. Rawan for this wonderful workshop. We really enjoyed it. Thank you all for attending the workshop. Stay tuned. On Wednesday, inshallah, we'll have another workshop about methodology, how to write a methodology chapter. And enjoy the rest of your night. We'll see you, inshallah, on Wednesday. Thank you, Dr. Rawan. Thank you all. We will see you on Wednesday, inshallah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Basim, and I'll see you, inshallah, everyone soon. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, please. My email is rsaty@kau.edu.sa. And I apologize for if any of the information that I've given were incorrect in any way to you, but inshallah, I mean, you're going to use it in any way, hopefully. And I'll see you, inshallah, in the future. Thank you.